Thank God! This incredible HFY masterpiece found you today. Witness the legend starting now. Let me tell you about the worst mistake the Vorath Empire ever made. Not the siege of Kaltara where they lost 40 warships to a magnetic storm they absolutely should have seen coming. Not the Treaty of Bensol where their diplomats accidentally signed away mineral rights to 3 moons because nobody bothered to learn the difference between lease and permanent surrender in standard galactic. Not even the time their Supreme Admiral declared war on a species that turned out to already be extinct, which honestly deserves its own historical archive. No, the worst mistake the Vorath Empire ever made was a Tuesday afternoon on a transit station called Pellory 9 when a soldier named Dracus decided to backhand a small human child because she was standing too close to the checkpoint line. Her name was Mara. She was 7 years old. She had a stuffed animal shaped like a blue dog, and her father was standing 6 m away watching the whole thing. His name was Callum Voss. I know what you are thinking. You are thinking, oh, another story about human rage. Another tale of the pink-skinned creatures and their laughable emotional responses. We had all heard these stories. Every species in the galactic congregate had heard these stories. Music, they were entertainment. They were folklore. They were the kind of thing you told your hatchlings at night to make them laugh, because surely the accounts were exaggerated. They were not exaggerated. Music, I was there. My name is Severcon, and I was a junior cultural observer assigned to Pellory 9 under the congregate's neutral monitoring program. I had a clipboard, a recording device, and approximately 0 combat training. I was there to document trade negotiations. I was not prepared for what I witnessed, and I have spent every rotation since trying to process it. So, let me start from the beginning. Pellory 9 was not a glamorous station. It sat at the edge of Vorath-controlled space like a tooth that needed pulling. Music. A rusted commercial hub with 17 docking bays. A market district that smelled like fermented grain and engine coolant. And a population of roughly 12,000 beings from 40 different species. Humans had been operating a small trade post there for about 6 standard years. They called their district Voss Corner because, as it turned out, most of the humans there were either related to or employed by one Callum Voss, who had apparently decided that the edge of Vorath-controlled space was a perfectly reasonable place to build a family business. I had met Callum Voss twice before the incident. The first time was during a routine documentation visit where he offered me something he called coffee, which I declined, and then he drank 3 cups of it himself while describing his supply chain logistics in more detail than I needed or wanted. He was by most external measurements unremarkable. Medium height for a human, somewhere in the age range they call mid-40s, with hair the color of storm clouds and eyes that were a very ordinary shade of brown. He spoke calmly. He smiled often. He had a habit of tilting his head slightly when he was listening, like he was filing away everything you said into some internal cabinet. Refer to later. The second time I met him, he was teaching his daughter how to play a board game, and she kept cheating. And he kept music letting her. And when I asked him about it, he just shrugged and said, "She is 7. She is learning the game." Music. There is no point winning against someone who does not know all the rules yet. I thought about that later. I thought about it a lot. The Vorath checkpoint on Pellory 9 had been a source of tension for months. The Empire had been slowly tightening its administrative grip on the station, which was their standard operating procedure before a formal annexation. First you establish checkpoints, then you establish curfews, then you establish a garrison. Then one morning you wake up, and the station is not a neutral commercial hub anymore. It is a Vorath administrative outpost, and if you want to leave, you need 17 forms of documentation and a good reason. Music. The checkpoint guards were not chosen for their customer service skills. Dracus in particular was a specimen of the Vorath military philosophy made flesh. He was large even by Vorath standards with the grey-green scale height, of the northern breeding lines and a facial structure that communicated approximately one emotion, which was contempt. He wore his rank badge with the specific pride of someone who knows he is small within a large institution and compensates by being as unpleasant as possible to anyone with less authority than himself. On the afternoon in question, the checkpoint line was long. There had been a supply delivery that morning, and half the station seemed to be moving cargo through at once. The air was hot. Music, the ventilation system on that level had been underperforming for 2 weeks because the Vorath administrator had declined to approve the maintenance request. People were tired and irritable, and the line was moving slowly because Dracus and his 2 subordinates were inspecting every container with the thoroughness of beings who had absolutely nowhere else to be. Mara Voss had gotten separated from the main Voss group by about 3 m. Not far. Music, and not concerning. She was standing near the checkpoint barrier, holding her stuffed blue dog, watching the cargo inspections with the frank curiosity that human children apply to absolutely everything. She was not in the way. She was not touching anything. She was simply a small person, standing in a space existing in it with the uncomplicated confidence of someone who has not yet learned that the universe is full of beings who will decide her existence is inconvenient. Dracus decided her existence was inconvenient. He did not warn, music, her. He did not gesture for her to move. He did not look at her with the particular coldness of someone who is about to do something they will regret. He just turned mid-step and struck her across the face with the back of his hand. She fell. The stuffed blue dog flew 3 feet in the other direction. The entire checkpoint went silent. Not the comfortable silence of a pause in conversation. The crystallized, suspended silence of a room full of beings who have just seen something that rewrites the next several hours of their lives, whether they wanted to or not. Mara did not cry immediately. That was the part that stayed with me. She sat on the ground for 2 full seconds, hand pressed to her cheek, eyes wide, processing what had just happened with the delayed comprehension of a child whose brain is still catching up to her body's experience. Then she looked across the checkpoint line, music, and I turned to follow her gaze. Callum Voss had been standing at a cargo scanner 6 m away talking to a Vorath customs official about a shipment of processed music grain. He had a data pad in one hand. He had been relaxed in the way that experienced traders learn to be relaxed in tense situations. A deliberate, music, practiced looseness that keeps negotiations moving. He was not relaxed anymore. I want to be precise about what I saw, because I am a trained observer and precision is my profession. He did not move immediately. That is the part that the accounts get wrong when they retell this story, and they do. Retell it across 12 star systems and counting. People say he charged. People say he screamed. People say he became something unrecognizable. Music. And none of that is accurate. What Callum Voss did in the 2 seconds after his daughter hit the floor was go very still. Not the stillness of shock. Not the stillness of fear. A different kind. The stillness of a being who has made a decision so completely and so finally that there is no longer any internal conflict requiring external expression. Every question had been asked and answered in the space between one breath and the next. The data pad in his hand lowered slowly. His eyes moved from Mara to Dracus with a precision that I can only describe as targeting. And then he smiled. I have thought about that smile for a long time. It was not angry. It was not threatening in any of the ways that a smile can be threatening. It was patient. It was the smile of someone who has just been told exactly what the rest of their day is going to look like and has decided that is fine. The customs official said something to him. I could not hear it from my position. Callum did not respond to the official. He set the data pad down on the scanner counter with the careful deliberateness of someone who intends to pick it up again later, and he walked toward the checkpoint barrier. Draconis had already turned back to his work. He had struck a child and turned back to his work, with the casual dismissiveness of someone who considers the matter closed. Music. He was looking at a manifest. He did not notice Callum Voss approaching because Callum Voss was not approaching, loudly or quickly or in any way that would register as a threat to someone who defines threats by volume and speed. "Hey," Callum said. His voice was conversational. "I am not exaggerating." He said it the way you might say it to a friend you spotted across a market. "Hey, here I am." Nothing alarming. Dracus turned. What happened next took approximately 4 seconds. Music. I am not going to describe it in detail, partly because this is a record intended for congregate archives and partly because I genuinely could not track all of it with my eyes. What I can tell you is that Dracus weighed approximately 240 kilograms, that Vorath guards at checkpoints are armed with a standard sidearm, a contact baton, and a secondary blade, and that at the end of those 4 seconds, none of those things were in Dracus's possession, and Dracus was on the floor and Callum Voss was standing over him holding the contact baton with the loose-wristed grip of someone who has used one before. He was not breathing hard. He looked down at Dracus the way you look at a task you have completed. Then he turned, walked back to where Mara was sitting, sat down on the floor beside her, and picked up the stuffed blue dog. He handed it, Music, to her. She took it. He put his arm around her and he said something quiet that I could not hear. And she leaned into him and he pressed his lips to the top of her head. The entire checkpoint was still watching. The 2 other Vorath guards were also still watching, which was interesting because they had not moved to assist Dracus, which told me something about the internal politics of that particular posting that I did not have time to analyze right now. What I did have time to notice was that 3 other humans from the Voss trading group had appeared as if from the walls themselves, positioned at the 3 exits of the checkpoint level. I had not seen them arrive. I did not know when they had arrived. Music. They were not doing anything threatening. They were just present, standing in doorways with their arms at their sides. Music. And their eyes on the checkpoint. One of them, a tall woman with dark red hair pulled back from her face, looked at the Vorath guards with an expression that I can only describe as an invitation. Not to fight, not exactly. More like a question, a very direct question. It sounded like, "Is there anything else?" There was not anything else. Dracus was removed by his subordinates. Mara Voss was taken, with her father and her stuffed blue dog, back to the Voss Corner district. I filed an incident report with the Congregate monitoring office in which I attempted to describe what I had witnessed with professional neutrality, and then I sat in my office for about an hour just thinking. I had seen interspecies altercations before. I had documented 37 of them across 4 postings. I understood combat. I understood threat responses. I understood protective instinct as a biological mechanism. What I did not understand, and what I spent that entire hour failing to understand, was the smile. Because here is the thing about Callum Voss's smile that I have not mentioned yet. Here is the part that the retelling always skips because it is uncomfortable and strange and does not fit cleanly into any narrative framework the rest of the galaxy uses. He was still smiling when he sat down next to Mara. Not the targeting smile. A different one. Softer, the one he had worn when she was cheating at the board game. Like none of this had cost him anything. Like this was just another part of the day. I did not understand it then. I understand it now. The Vorath response came in 3 stages, which is their standard protocol for what they classify as a civilian resistance incident. Stage 1 is administrative, a formal demand for the individual responsible to present themselves to the garrison authority for processing. Music. Stage 2 is punitive. If the individual does not comply, their associates and dependents face restricted movement. Stage 3 is demonstrative. If restriction does not produce compliance, an example is made. The Vorath administrator on Pellory 9 was a man named Voraxian. Music. And I want to be fair to him here. I genuinely do, because history has not been kind to Vorath, and some of that is his own fault and some of it is circumstance. Music. He was a mid-level bureaucrat who had been assigned to Pellory 9 because his political connections were adequate but not exceptional. Music. And he had been managing the slow annexation process for 3 years, without any significant complications. He was competent. He was not creative. And he was, fatally, working from a playbook that had been written for situations that did not include Callum Voss. He issued the Stage 1 demand. Within 2 hours of the checkpoint incident, Callum Voss sent back a response that I will quote directly, music, from the official communication record because it deserves to be preserved exactly as written. Thank you for your message. I am available for a meeting at your convenience. I would suggest you bring someone who can discuss the legal parameters of checkpoint authority over non-Vorath nationals under the Pellory Commerce Accords, specifically clauses 7 through 14, as I will have questions. Also, your guard struck my daughter. I would like that addressed formally before any other discussion proceeds. Best regards, Callum Voss. Vorath read this message and made a mistake. Music. He interpreted it as negotiation. It was not negotiation. It was notification. The meeting was scheduled for the following morning in the administrative wing of the station's central hub. I attended as a congregate observer, which I had formally requested permission to do, citing the ongoing documentation of the annexation process, and which Vorath had approved because having a congregate observer present gave the proceedings an air of legitimacy that he wanted. Callum Voss arrived alone. No legal representation. No associates. No visible backup of any kind. He was wearing clean work clothes and carrying a single document folder. And he looked, music, for all purposes, like a man who had come to a meeting. Vorath had 8 guards in the room. I noticed that Callum noticed the 8 guards in the same way that you, or I might notice a minor architectural detail, with brief acknowledgement and no particular feeling about it. He sat down. Vorath began, as Vorath officials always begin, with the formal recitation of grievances, the incident at music, the checkpoint, the assault on an imperial officer, the disruption of administrative process, music, the required response under imperial code. Callum listened to all of it. He had his hands folded on the table. He nodded occasionally. He waited until Vorath finished. Then he opened his document folder. Clause 9 of the Pellory Commerce Accords, he said, states that imperial security personnel operating within commercial zones designated as multinational do not hold authority to physically compel or discipline non-Vorath nationals unless those nationals present an active security threat. My daughter is 7 years old. She was not presenting a security threat. Therefore, under the terms your empire signed when it was granted administrative co-authority over this station. Music. The action taken by your guard was not legal. He placed the document on the table. I would like a formal acknowledgement of that in writing before we proceed. Music. Vorath looked at him. Vorath looked at the 8 guards. Vorath looked back at him. You struck an imperial officer, Vorath said. I defended my child, Callum said. Those are different things. You know they are different things. That is why you have not arrested me already. Because you know that any formal proceeding will require you to justify the original action, and you cannot justify it under the accords you are legally bound by. There was a silence. It was not a comfortable silence. The Empire, Vorath said, carefully, does not recognize the accords as superseding imperial authority within administrative zones. The Empire, Callum said, just as carefully, signed them. Another silence. Mr. Voss, Vorath said, I want to be clear about something. You are one man in an imperial-administered station surrounded by imperial personnel. Whatever legal argument you believe you have, The practical reality of your situation is what? Callum said. He said it pleasantly, curiously even. The way a question you genuinely want the answer to. Vorath did not finish the sentence. And I wrote in my observation notes, in handwriting that was slightly less steady than my professional standard. Something is wrong. I do not know what it is yet, but something is very wrong with this situation. And I think I am the only person in this room who is correctly afraid. I was right, but not in the way I expected. Let me tell you what Vorath did not know. He did not know that Callum Voss had spent 11 years before his trading career as a field operative for a human organization called the Reach Directorate, which, depending on who you ask, either does not exist or is responsible for approximately 40% of the quiet political shifts in human-adjacent space over the last 2 decades. He did not know that the trading group operating out of Voss Corner was not, strictly speaking, only a trading group. He did not know that the 3 humans who had appeared at the checkpoint exits the previous afternoon had not appeared by coincidence or instinct, but because Callum Voss had sent a signal from his wrist communicator in the half-second between setting down his data pad and walking toward Dracus. He had planned it. Not the incident itself, but the response to the incident. The response had been planned for months, in the quiet way that experienced operatives plan for contingencies they hope will never arrive, but prepare for anyway, because hope is not a strategy. I did not know any of this during the meeting. I found it out later, in pieces, music, from sources I am not going to name in a document that will eventually enter the Congregate's General Archive. What I can tell you is that by the time Callum Voss sat down across from Vorath with his document folder and his folded hands, he had already done 3 things that Vorath did not know about. First, he had sent a full recording of the checkpoint incident, with legal annotation referencing the Pellory Commerce Accords to the Congregate's Judicial Monitoring Division. Not a complaint, a formal evidentiary submission, time-stamped, certified, and copied to 4 separate Congregate member species diplomatic officers, including 2 who had been looking for a procedural lever against Vorath expansion.